So let me begin today's class by doing a quick review of the last class. So yesterday we discussed basically perturbative solution of the density matrix with light matter interaction, and we use that to calculate the first order optical susceptibility. And today we are going to continue along that line. We will do the second order solution of the density matrix and use that to calculate the second order nonlinear optical susceptibility. Okay. So the second order nonlinear optical susceptibility is related to a lot of terms which you will encounter in the literature. So there will be terms like nonlinear susceptibility to start with, let's say, then second harmonic generation, some frequency generation, difference frequency generation, and also what is called rectification. So optical rectification. Okay. So these are all processes, different physical processes, which are related to second order optical susceptibility. But before we go, let's just quickly review. So we had this equation of motion for the density matrix evolution in time, where the last term came from those part of the Hamiltonian, which we have not explicitly included in the system, but the system has some interactions with the environment. Okay. And they manifest by broadening out the energy levels of quantum systems, basically. Okay. And I argued in detail why this takes the system to equilibrium, it kills the coherence of the system, etc., and so on and so forth. Okay. And the rho nm equilibrium had no off diagonal terms, etc. Okay. And then we set up the perturbation theory by assuming that Vt is lambda Vt. So so the total H I can write as H naught plus lambda Vt, and then we had this series. And as soon as I put both of these into this equation of motion, we could write down this equation of motion order by order in the density matrix. So the zeroth order equation is slightly different, but the first order, second order, all are sort of recursive relations. So the n plus 1 terms connect the n minus 1 terms, which appears here in the V rho n minus 1 commutator. Okay. And then we saw how we can solve these equations. So we can directly integrate, etc. So this is very general. Then we did it specifically for the light matter interaction, where I said there are two ways to include light matter interaction. So one is the length gauge, one is the velocity gauge. And one example or one proof that we did not do is that, if I neglect the space dependent of light, meaning e to the power I kr in the e to the power I kr minus omega t of Et, let's say, then you can show that I can go from one to the other by doing a unitary transformation. Okay, so that I'll give you as a problem somewhere. Okay, to show that. Okay, so they are equivalent formalisms. They have a slightly different picture. One is in terms of momentum or velocity and the acceleration. So the first derivative of h and the second derivative of h. First derivative of h is like the velocity. Second derivative of h is like the acceleration. And here we have a picture in terms of this dipole moment. So we will start having accumulating products of the dipole moment, etc. But both will give you finally same answer because you can do a unitary transformation and go from one to the other. Okay. And then we specifically considered this problem that, more than one light frequency can be incident on the system, a two-level system, let's say. And we wanted to calculate the linear optical susceptibility. Okay, so we calculated the density matrix evolution explicitly, etc. And we showed that it looks like this. And then if we integrate, do this time-dependent integration, etc., then for this light matter interaction in the length gauge, we explicitly calculated the first order density matrix. Okay. And once we had this density matrix, we argued that I can calculate the dipole moment of a single atom. And just like the density matrix occurs as powers of electric field, etc., I can have the dipole moment also having zeroth order correction, first order, second order correction, etc., where the superscript refers to the power of the electric field, etc. Okay. And broadly, since the matrix operator corresponding to mu is just based on the properties of the material, it doesn't have any power of the electric field. So the whole power comes from the power of the density matrix in the electric field, basically. Okay, so rho k. Okay, so this was the definition of the kth component, kth power of the uh, dipole matrix element and for the atom. And in realistic systems, we will always be dealing with a collection of atoms. So let's talk about the ensemble. So the total polarization of the ensemble, which is what light will interact with, is given by n times this mu omega. Okay, and this total polarization of the ensemble will go into Maxwell's equation. It modifies a lot of physical properties, etc., and all of those are what we will measure. Okay. Then this polarization, I can write in terms of powers of the electric field. And that writing in terms of the powers of the electric field gives me chi1 for linear order correction. It will give me chi2 for quadratic order correction. And it will give me chi3 for cubic order correction and higher harmonics, etc. So chi1 is called the linear susceptibility. Chi2 is called the second harmonic susceptibility or quadratic susceptibility. Chi3 is called the cubic or third order susceptibility, and all others are called higher harmonic susceptibilities, basically. Okay, so the optical susceptibilities are always related to this quantity P, polarization. Okay. And this polarization is what goes into the Maxwell's equation whenever we have light matter together in the system, and so on. Okay, so using the density matrix obtained, we explicitly calculate we express. So we explicitly calculated the chi, and chi had this form. So clearly, when the population difference between the two states, so excited and the lower ground state, is equal, then everything vanishes. But if they are not equal, then I'll have some contribution of chi ij. And depending on, if the population in the excited level is above, then I will have mostly emission. If the population in the ground state is more, excited state is less, then I'll have more emission and so on. And so forth. Okay. So these are both terms which are examples of stimulated absorption and emission. And I explicitly argued that, the product of the dipole matrix element is will turn out to be real. So I've not shown that explicitly, but you can show that explicitly. And then the whole dependence of this chi ij on frequency just comes from this denominator term, basically, which is just so if I write the real part, then it will just be simply the Lorentzian with the full width at half maximum being 2 gamma mn. So the broadening between the mn and levels, etc. And the real part will look like this, basically. Okay. And another thing that I should have mentioned yesterday, or that should be mentioned along with this, is the real part and the imaginary part of any response function. So the susceptibility is the first order response function. So they are connected by what are called Kramers-Kronig relations. Okay. So we will do them in a later class, etc. So I'll argue in general how they are connected, and Kramers-Kronig we should definitely know. Okay. Even the nonlinear parts will be connected by Kramers-Kronig, etc. So that I'll do in a later class. Okay. But so Kramers-Kronig is just a relation. So if I know the imaginary part, then I can calculate the real part in terms of the imaginary part. So that's all to be known. So if I measure absorption, then that will give me, let's say, the imaginary part of the susceptibility. And using that, I can calculate the real part. Okay. So I do one measurement, I will have both, basically imaginary and real part, both. Just because they are related by Kramers-Kronig relations. Okay. So that is important. So this is from yesterday's lecture. If there are any questions, let's take them now. Questions? No questions? Okay. So maybe, yeah, early in the morning to take questions. So then I'll just continue along these lines and calculate the second order, let's say, corrections. Okay. So let me just share screen for another set of lecture notes. Okay. Okay. So today we'll specifically talk about the density matrix and second order susceptibility. So the quadratic calculation of the polarization function. Okay. So explicitly we will calculate the second order correction in rho or rho nm superscript bracket 2, and use this second order density matrix to calculate the susceptibility. Okay. Or the polarization correction up to second order in the optical field, as I already mentioned. Okay. Okay. So before we go, let's go back a bit and talk about susceptibilities related to the polarization in general. Okay. So for an optical wave, I will always have a electric field which can be sum of more than one component. So there can be more than one frequencies, And anyway, so the n will always be positive and negative frequencies because I have written it as a complex number. So the real electric field will always be a real number. So I'll have a complex conjugate of this with some phase. So depends on, they can come with a different uh, amplitude, basically that will give rise to a phase also. Okay, so I can write either in this notation, or Bloyd also use slightly different notation. So I have just mentioned that also. So either I can write it E omega n, which will have a R dependence explicitly times e to the power minus, or I can write in terms of A omega n, which will not have a R dependence and it will have e to the power I k n r minus omega n t, basically, right? And n can be, more than one component, and of course for each component it will have plus and minus frequencies also. So that is important. Okay. Then of course, I mean, if you want this to be real, then e of minus omega n has to be e omega n complex conjugate, and same for the an notation, etc. And if we take a concrete example, for example, if you demand that E in the real space T, the real electric field is given by this vector xi, so the polarization vector times cos of kr minus omega t, then you can just using this definition, you can just immediately show that E of omega is half of this polarization vector times e to the power I k dot r. So the electric field has explicit R dependence, and A omega, because in A omega I had already taken out the KR dependence, etc. So A omega is half of epsilon, basically. And the half comes because cos I always write is half of e to the power I x plus e to the power minus ix, basically, is equal to cos x. Okay. So that's where the half comes from, and E of minus omega you can similarly show that is given by this relation. So this is just to connect to some notation, and then I can have, so if I use this notation, that I will write the complex electric field, but it will be understood that I use the positive and negative frequencies both, basically. So that's omega n sum includes both positive and negative frequencies. Then for multiple frequency beam, I can write E is just a fastly oscillating electric field is just a sum over E omega n times e to the power I omega n t, sum over n. Okay, so this sum over n is of course for each frequency I'll have sum over minus of that frequency, plus I can have different frequencies of light incident in my experimental system. Okay, okay, and then let me make an assumption that all the charges in the system will be influenced by this electric field in a sort of a instantaneous manner. No? Okay. If I do that, so then I can make the statement that the time dependence of the polarization, which is the charge density moment, let's say, should be in sync with the electric field, basically. So if E is given by like this, let's say, En e to the power I omega n t, then all the polarization terms should also be given in a similar format. Okay. So this P polarization as a function of time, in general, I can write it in this particular form. So chi1 et, chi2 e square, let's say, plus chi3 e cube. Sorry, so there's a typo here. So this should be e cube. Okay, chi3 e cube plus chi4 e to the power 4, and so on and so forth. Okay, a lot of higher order terms. So this is an infinite series. This is just a definition of the skies, etc. I'm just making a statement that P will depend to all orders in the electric field. Okay. So the first order, of course, is the linear susceptibility, what is called the linear response regime. We will always focus on the first term. And chi2 is called the quadratic susceptibility related to the second harmonic generation. And chi3 is called the cubic susceptibility or the third harmonic generation, etc. Okay. And another thing which is important to understand is this P is a vector and the electric field is a vector. So I connect one vector to one vector. So the chi has to be a matrix. Right? So a matrix is a second rank tensor. Okay. And then when I come to the second order term, then P is a vector. When I write E square, E is a vector. Another power of E is a vector. So I'll have in general two components on the coming from E, EI, EJ. P will have a component PK. So I have a three component object. So this chi has to have in general three free components. So it's a generalization of a matrix with three indices, basically. So that kind of a quantity is called a rank 3 tensor. Okay, and if I go along similar lines, then E cube can have a I, J, K coefficients, and P can have a L, let's say, where L and I, J, K are all X, Y, Z, etc. component, etc. So chi3 will become a rank 4 tensor. Okay. So this is important to understand. All higher order susceptibilities grow in rank as they start. So the zeroth rank tensor is a vector. So zeroth order susceptibility will be a vector. The first order susceptibility is a second rank tensor. Second order susceptibility is a third rank tensor, and so on and so forth. Okay. And we discussed this chi1 explicitly in the last class, and I argued that experimentally it will manifest in optical absorption, reflection amplitude, transmission amplitude, polarization, rotation, and a lot of other things, etc. But these are some things which immediately came to my mind, which I can measure for doing optical experiments. So by doing experiments on light. Okay. Then chi2 is a rank 3 tensor. We just come from a statement that vector is equal to vector into vector. Then whatever connects it has to have 3 components basically. So it has to be a rank 3 tensor. Okay. So then if we just write each of these terms in this particular form, so I break down the frequency, etc. Then the P also I can write down as powers of electric field. So this is P2. So there should be a superscript here, P2, omega n and omega m. So each power of the electric field can have its own omega. So I'll have the formal definition here. So the P2, so the second order polarization correction is given by epsilon 0 times this quantity, which is one power of the electric field, which oscillates with frequency omega n, another power of the electric field, which oscillates with frequency omega m, and this chi2 ijk is a function of both of these frequencies, omega m and omega n. Okay. So that's the formal definition of the second order susceptibility. Okay. And here J and K, of course, are dummy indices. So it's just like a matrix multiplication. So I am ultimately interested in the I component. So the J and K are summed over, etc. That is number one. And the N and M are also summed over with some constraint, actually. So the bracket shows that the N and M will be summed over such that omega N plus omega M always remain constant. Okay. So with that constraint, so this is how it is written. And there are two more notation for writing this second order susceptibility. So the same thing that I have written here, underlined with this gray lines, etc., is generally written in this particular form. So chi ijk, I will have omega m, one frequency of light incident, another frequency of light incident, and the third term is omega n plus omega m. Okay, comma. So the omega n plus omega m is explicitly written to denote that the final answer will depend on this. So the reason it is written is when we calculate, you will see that the final polarization will oscillate with this frequency, e to the power minus I omega n plus omega m t. So this is the frequency for this omega n plus omega m oscillating term, basically. So that is what this notation denotes. And this is the notation which is used in Lloyd, from where we are mostly following our discussion for these parts. Another notation which is used in the literature is like this. So omega m, omega n, and then there is a semicolon and omega p. So omega 1, 2, and 3, such that omega p is always sum over. So that is understood basically. Okay, so it's not explicitly written, but it's sort of understood. So that's the formal definition of second order susceptibility. Questions here? Now we will go to explicit calculation. But before that, questions on this part, basically. I can do exactly similar analysis and this also define the third order optical susceptibility. Okay. So all of these higher order susceptibilities form the field of what is called nonlinear optics, which is the whole of Lloyd's book, basically. A very good book, actually. Okay. So questions here. Okay. So if there are no questions, then these things are completely clear. Let's proceed.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Sunit, yeah, go ahead.
Hello,
Yeah, go ahead.
sir. Omega n plus omega m. Hello, yeah. Omega n plus omega n will be always constant.
Uh,
Hello.
so yeah, make it more precise. What is your worry?
So my question is why omega n plus omega m should always be constant?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So
Like
I'm coming to the answer of that question just now. Okay. I'm coming to the answer of
okay,
that question. Okay.
yes,
Just
sir.
now. Okay. Yeah. Here. So this part will just answer your question. Okay. So let's say I
Yes,
have
yes, sir.
a problem where two frequencies, omega 1 and omega 2, are incident on a system. Right. So I shine light, which has two frequencies, omega 1 and omega 2 on the system. And I calculate this quantity, chi2 of omega 3, omega 1 and omega 3. Right. So the omega 3 can come from this many different combinations, which is written on the right hand side. So five different combinations. Okay. So omega 3 can be sum over omega 1 and omega 2. Okay. In a sense that I have two electrical light beams. So the EJ and EK both can have frequencies omega and omega. In that case, I'll have a 2 omega 1 as omega 3. Okay. Then I can have 2 omega 2. Okay. So what I'm saying is I have shown light of two frequencies, omega 1 and omega 2. Okay. Now, the second order susceptibility can come from the second order processes arising from omega 1 beam plus another omega 1 beam, or it can arise from the second order processes involving omega 2 beam plus another omega 2 beam electric field. Okay. So these are the first two terms that gives me second harmonic generation. Okay. So just I have just same frequency, I have doubled. So that is called second harmonic. So I shown light of one frequency, but the response will be the sum of their frequencies. So I shine an electric field of frequency omega, but the polarization is oscillating with 2 omega. Okay, so that's second harmonic generation, uh, more precisely. Okay, then I can have two electric field interaction where I take the plus omega 1 component of the first field and I can have the minus omega 2 component of the second field. No? And that will give me omega 3 is equal to omega 1 minus omega 2 difference frequency generation. So that's called technically the difference frequency generation. Okay. Similarly, I can interact so that I take the plus omega 2 component and plus omega 1 component of two beams, and that term will give me omega 3 is equal to omega 1 plus omega 2. That is some frequency generation. Okay. And finally, I can also interact with the two fields such that the plus omega oscillating term combines with the minus I omega oscillating terms and they cancel out so that it gives me what is called optical rectification. Okay. So writing again. So second order susceptibility in general can have four different processes. So I have two frequency shining on the material, etc. So I can have second order processes involving both the same frequency electric field. So those terms are like second harmonic generation or rectification. Okay. Then I can have the two different frequencies, one order and one order are contributing. They can give rise to some frequency generation or what is called the difference frequency generation. So I think this answers your question, right? This is what you are asking, I guess. Or is there further question?
No, sir. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Right.
yes, sir.
So I have two. Yeah. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Yes, sir. I have seen that chi2 is represented like minus omega 3 semicolon omega 1 comma omega 2. So what does this minus represents? Sir?
So there's the same notation. See, so whenever we are writing this, etc., we have written the complex notation, etc., right? So the omega can be
Yes.
plus or minus also.
Okay.
So the
No,
omega 3
sir.
can be minus also. It's the same notation basically. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. But some authors can use that, omegas, I will only treat as a positive quantity. So I'll put the minus sign explicitly.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I've just written, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, as you have said that whenever we are shining lights of two different frequencies, say we assume that omega 1 is not equal to omega 2, right? So there are two possibilities that if either they are like omega 1 plus omega 2, or
Yeah.
they are like omega 1 minus omega 2, or omega 2 minus omega 1. So
Okay.
in each case, when we are shining such two frequency lights, so there will be like three possible processes. So like all of them are possible at the same time. Means we have
Yeah. They're all
finite
possible at the
probabilities.
same time. Correct.
Okay, so we have finite probabilities of each of that. So
Yeah. Plus we have finite probabilities of two other terms, matlab. Okay. So I can at the same time I can have two omega processes also.
yeah, only when omega 1 is equal to omega
No,
2.
even if they are unequal, etc.,
Yeah.
the nonlinear term can have both components coming from the same field, right?
Okay, I get.
So all of these processes are simultaneous.
Yeah.
Okay.
But is there any preference like which one is more probable than
Yeah.
other?
So that's an excellent question, actually. Okay. So different kind of systems. Okay. So what distinguishes between where this will sign, etc. Okay. Okay. So what happens is the light intensity is fixed. So I will send the same amount of light energy, let's say, into the system, and the energy is distributed between these five processes, etc. Right?
Yes.
So generally, one of these processes will dominate, and the others will be suppressed, etc. And we design different kind of systems which have more energy transfer to particular kind of processes, and which suppress different kind of the other processes, giving rise to different kinds of devices.
Okay.
So sometimes I may want, this optically tunable laser. So I have a fixed laser, high intensity. I want to give it another frequency uh, laser. I want to combine, which is tunable. And then I want it to, the final frequencies to be tunable, basically with a strong intensity. So then I will uh, use the processes which are called some frequency generation. Okay. And sometimes I want to do experiments at lower frequencies, etc. And I want tunable frequencies. So I will use a high intensity laser, then I'll combine it with a tunable low intensity laser, etc., to generate a difference frequency generation. Okay. And similarly, so different things I need different applications. I need different processes to be highlighted, and we design systems which will have different susceptibilities, which have more amplitude. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So a priori, I do not know. Okay, so we will calculate these explicitly, and then after calculation, we can get some intuition, etc. Which system will have this term more dominating, which system will have this term more dominating, etc. And things like that.
Sir, can you just once again repeat that thing? Like you said, for experiments, we take a high frequency laser and something. I could not follow the entire thing.
Yeah. Okay. So in lab, for example, I may want to do experiment where my x-axis is frequency.
Yes.
Right. So I want to study some processes by varying the frequency.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And suppose so I have a, let's say, a green laser in the lab.
Hmm.
Okay. I do not have a, let's say, blue laser or a UV laser.
Hmm.
Okay. But I know that my system may show responses there. Matlab.
Okay.
Okay. Then from green laser, how do I construct a blue laser?
Hmm.
So that I can do by using the some frequency generation.
Achha.
Okay. And I'll have the same problem. Suppose I have a green laser and I want to do experiments in the red laser regime.
Hmm.
Okay. Then I'll use the difference frequency generation.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. So that's all I said. And in optics, okay, so the rectification also may play a role, etc. But I can tell you this rectification. So in condensed matter systems, particularly, so we have, let's say, if there are metals, there are free charges, etc. in the lattice, which can travel anywhere, etc. So we get photocurrents. Okay, so the whole of what you call photocurrents is actually the rectification current. So I shine light and I get a DC current in the system, zero frequency current in the system. The whole of solar cells, are based on this rectification, optical rectification process.
Mhm.
No, and solar cells is huge currently industry. No, so some part of our total energy resources for this world are generated by solar cells, right? So I do not remember the exact number, but let's say even 2-3% is of our electricity needs are generated by solar cells. No, and the physics behind all of solar cell application is this optical rectification. So I shine light and I generate a DC current, photocurrent, etc., which is intrinsically a second order process. Because from omega frequency response, I can never generate a zero frequency response in the linear regime. So, but I can combine omega with a minus omega to cancel out the omegas and I get a rectification. So the optical rectification is whole of photocurrent industry or whole of solar cell industry, if you like. Of course, there's a lot of technology there, but the idea is this. I shine light, white light, right? So I shine light on the solar cell of different frequencies, the whole spectrum, Vibgyor, and then I get a DC current. Okay, so that's your optical rectification, solar cells, all of solar cells. Actually. So is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so, for example, if you can design a material of this, very efficient rectification, right? So currently, solar cells, for example, none of the solar cells have more than 20% efficiency, as far as I know. It is commercially available, let's say. Okay. In some very state of the art experiment, they may have achieved till 30% efficiency. So if light of intensity 100 shines on it, then the energy that is converted into currents or voltages by solar cell is only 20% of that energy, or in some state of the art experiments 30%. Okay. So if you do, for example, if you design something, etc., and you can bring this efficiency to 40%, and 40% in a system which is commercially viable, then you'll get a Nobel Prize and you'll get a billionaire. You will be a billionaire, for example. Okay, so just from this basic physics, so you just have to find the right material. You just have to optimize its processes so that you can get 40% solar conversion efficiency. Number two, and then number three, it has to be scalable in the sense that it should be built of such materials, etc., that we can generate lots of these things, etc., and we can actually apply them today. Then most likely, so billionaire 100% certainty just from the patent income, let's say, and Nobel Prize most likely. Okay, not guaranteed, but yeah, very likely. Okay, so that's the that's, let's say, one motivation to study optics. Okay, so let's come back from Nobel Prize and billionaire to explicitly calculate the second order density matrix, right? So that was our goal to begin with, right? So we wanted to calculate the second order correction in rho, and we wanted to use it to calculate the second order optical susceptibility. And we digressed a bit to take to the definitions of optical susceptibility, different processes, etc. And then I got excited about rectification being a $1 billion industry. Okay. So coming back, let's calculate the second order density matrix. So this equation we had already derived. So let me write down the second order correction to rho. So the right hand side is written in terms of the first order term. So the left hand side is written in terms of the first order term on the right hand side under the integral, etc. So we need to explicitly calculate this quantity V rho commutator, nth element, etc. And if I write that explicitly, so V was, remember, minus mu dot E, etc. So if I write explicitly the matrix multiplication, then I get a sum over K mu nk rho Km. So the K index, which is summed over, first term ends with that, second term starts with that, time minus of rho nk mu mk, etc. And the rho 1 we had already calculated in the last class, actually. Okay, so we calculated it. We had a general index of nm. So now I'll change the index so that I match with this term. So rho 1 Km. So I'll just take in the result from our last class and change the indices. Okay, so you need to check this explicitly. Okay. 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 So till now, no problem actually. Yeah, okay, okay. But I'm seeing that later I'll end up in a problem. So I'll highlight when it comes actually. Okay. So minor issue of notation, nothing else. Okay. Yeah. But till now, no issue. Okay. So row one is this, and row one of nk is exactly this. So I'll just change the notation km going to nk. So you can actually match. So the m is the second index, n is the first index. So first index, second index, first index, and similarly the other term you can match basically. So row one sum over p, so the electric field can come in different frequencies, etc. So that is the sum, and so on. Okay, now using this we can explicitly calculate this term. So I have not written down the explicit thing, but if that's a homework exercise, you can do this to calculate this V rho, and the result is equation 3.66 of Bloyd's book basically, and you can use that to calculate. So now once I have the V rho, I can then just immediately integrate this term, etc. Because all I will get out of this is just a factor like this, e to the power I omega pt, and yeah, so that will go here basically. So that will go here. So omega nm plus omega p plus gamma nm. Okay, so all I get a term like that, and I'll just integrate that. Okay, so if I integrate that, etc., I'll get rho 2 to be of this particular form. Okay, so sum over k pq, sum over pq, frequency sum, the k sum times a factor which looks like this, e to the power I omega p plus omega qt times some quantity which is independent of time, which I'll define as k nmk. Okay, and k nmk, so capital K nmk looks like this actually. So let's go back. So I had two terms basically here, right? So mu times rho 1, and rho 1 had this term basically, rho mm minus rho k0, right? So that will give me half of this, and the other half gives me the other half, right? So these are the two terms basically. So the first term comes from the first term of that equation, so rho mm minus rho kk0, and the second part comes from the second half of the commutator, so rho 0 kk minus rho nn basically divided by h square. And I have all of these basically the mu dot e which come. So mu dot e from the second interaction. So I already had mu dot e here, and the other part will come from mu which is here, and dot e basically. So I get two powers of mu dot e, and depending on which orbitals I am considering, etc. So remember that here nmk are all orbital indices, no, orbital indices in terms of the non-interacting Hamiltonian. Okay, so that's what I'll get basically. Okay, so I've tried to be careful in writing this, so you can also check that these are correct, and if there is any error, let me know. Okay, so you do this calculation explicitly, 2 pages of writing, you will end up here. Okay, okay. But the important point is that rho 2 has only this kind of a time dependence, e to the power I omega p plus omega q t. No? And with this kind of time dependence, we know that I can easily integrate the V rho, this thing, term which comes in the third order susceptibility, etc. So rho 3 also you can easily calculate. Okay. So rho 3 calculation we will not do explicitly in this course, but no, it proceeds along the same line. Okay. Now, so we have the expression for density matrix. Let's come back to polarization calculation. Okay. Okay, so polarization calculation, so dipole moment calculation is just trace of rho times mu operator. And if I write the matrix product, then I have to sum over m, rho nm mu nm. And trace means I'll sum over the diagonal element. So I'll sum over the nth element. So that is the sum over n basically. Okay. And now mu also, because mu will depend on the electric field. So mu also I can expand in terms of its Fourier components, frequency components, let's say. Then mu r basically is just given by this equation. So mu of omega p plus omega q is given by this k, which we wrote down, nmk times mu m n basically, where I have to be sum over nm. Sum over nm comes from the stress sum, and rho 2 was already this sums basically k, and sum over pq, sum over nm k basically. Okay, so that's your so I explicitly wrote down k. There is a short form of writing mu. We will write down this explicitly, and you can connect it to the polarization. So this is second order correction to the dipole moment of one atom. This is second order correction to the polarization of all atoms. So n times this mu quantity, and I just multiply this whole thing by epsilon 0 n. N is missing here. Okay, so n I have to write, and then there's just this term basically, nothing else. So nmk I have brought together because they are all sum over the orbitals. Pq is a sum over frequency, so I written separately, and pq has a constraint that, you know, I am looking at the p plus q combination. So I'll always be constrained with omega p plus omega q constant. Okay. So what I'm looking at is the end result at this frequency component, and this frequency component may arise from several combinations of the incident frequencies. So as long as the final sum is constant, I need to include all of those processes basically. That's all there is to it. Okay. And then recall the second order susceptibility definition. So P2 omega P plus Q was written like this. So sum over Jk, Pq, Ijk, Ej, and Ek. Okay. So here I run into the minor this thing, notation problem. Okay, which I should have noticed earlier. Okay. So remember that here I used the K notation as the index for orbitals. Okay. And when I write down this equation, I am using I and Jk for Cartesian coordinates. Okay, so the K index turns out to be used repeatedly for two different things. So ideally it should have been a different notation. So I'll put a K prime. When I upload these notes, I'll make all of these Ks which are orbital as K prime, and the Cartesian I'll put as IJK basically indexes. Okay, but the meaning will be clear from where we are, whether the K is the Cartesian index or if it appears in mu nk etc., then it is a orbital index. So the meaning will be clear from when we write down the terms etc. Okay. Okay. So we already calculated the polarization. We calculated the mu, and the polarization I can write in terms of this mu. So using this relation now, I can write down this chi2 explicitly. Okay. For some reason, I'll not write down this as chi2. Let me write this down as chi2 prime. Okay, omega p plus. So the reason will become clear in a minute. So omega p plus omega q, omega p becomes this n by epsilon naught h bar square times this sum over nmk. So the orbital indices sum. So these are our orbital indices, mmkk. Then omega mn, nk, and km in the subscript are all orbital indices. Okay, but remember this was ijk. So here it is a Cartesian indices, and omega I, omega j, and k. So this k is a Cartesian coordinate index basically. Okay, so I had these two terms. So the same things basically get translated here. So I had the one side of the commutator V-rho. So I got this term. The other side of the commutator, I got this term, and that's what it is basically. So, so I'm missing out a bracket. Let me just see. Yeah. So at the end, I should have this square bracket closure basically indicating that all of these terms. So the whole of A term, whole of B term, and the half of this equation 7 line is within this curly brackets basically. Okay. So that's your second order susceptibility. Questions till now? Okay. and it includes all the processes, right? Because I have not specified what omega p and omega q explicitly are, basically. So the sum can also go to 0, rectification. The sum can be, sum over different frequencies, omega q and p and omega q can be different. So that's some frequency generation. Then omega p can be negative omega p, negative of mod omega p, let's say. So that will become a difference frequency generation, right? Or rectification. So it includes all of these processes, basically. Okay. So that's why we are considering in terms of the output frequency. So what is the output frequency? That is will decide which term it is. But till now, this is very, very general. And the way it is done, I have not explicitly used material properties. I have explicitly not used quantum statistics, etc. So the quantum statistics is inbuilt into rho 0 of and rho 0 of kk. And the material properties are built into this dipole matrix element. So mu, mn, I. No? So that is just our expectation value of the orbital. So all the material properties are built into there. Okay. And the broadening includes some bit of material properties and some bit of its coupling. So experimental system, basically. And yeah, so that's all. Okay. Okay. And the material properties are also inbuilt into this omega mn, which is just omega m minus omega n. So the single optical transitions are inbuilt into this, basically. So any question here? Okay. So you have derived second order optical susceptibility. Okay. So now one issue with the thing that we have derived here, one minor issue actually. So this is technically correct. Physically, it will give you the right answer. But just for, ease of doing calculations using this, etc., there's one minor issue with this. And that issue is that chi2 ijk should be symmetric under permutation of the last two indices. So jk, basically. Okay. And this permutation symmetry is useful for calculations which will involve higher order terms or which will involve many of these kind of processes. Okay. That's not a requirement. That's just a ease. What do you say? That's not a necessary requirement, but that's a ease of use requirement, let's say. Okay. So it will make our life later in many cases easier. So we define chi ijk generally so that it has this permutation symmetry. So I'll have more about this. So briefly reviewing permutation symmetry, let's say. So pi, for example, I define in this particular form. So epsilon 0 sum over jk chi ijk, this frequency. I am following Lloyd's notation of defining chi2, and ej ek. So here the last term should be ek omega m actually. Okay, so minor error here. Okay, now the j and the k indices will be summed over, right? So they are definitely dummy indices, meaning the j and k I can change the order and they should not decide the final outcome. Okay, but note that ej I have associated with omega n and ek I have associated with the omega m. And omega m and omega n also, it is up to me. So what frequency I am calling omega m and omega n, I have not specified. Okay. So omega m and omega n are also dummy indices. Okay. But the fact is that if I interchange j and k, so if ej I write as ek and I write m instead of omega n, so omega n becomes omega m, then the last two terms remain the same. No, and with that change, the pi should be exactly same. Okay, so that implies that if I do this interchange both simultaneously, then pi I should be able to write epsilon naught jk. Now chi, so I will change k and j. So chi2 of I kj. Okay, and then I have to change omega m and omega n ordering also. Okay, because the way it is written, it implies that the second index comes with omega n and the third index k comes with omega m. So here, since I've changed the indices, so omega k, so ek comes with the omega m now, the second one frequency, and the third index comes with the omega n. Okay, and I've done nothing. I've just done some juggling, redefinition of which one I'll call omega m, which one I'll call omega n. Okay, so nothing physically has changed. So these two have to be identical, right? And the fact that these two will be identical is called intrinsic permutation symmetry. Okay. Chi of ijk2 has to be omega m. So omega m plus omega n, omega m has to be chi of jk flipped. So chi of I kj omega n plus omega m. So the total has to be same, but the frequencies also have interchange. So the simultaneous interchange of jk indices and the omega m and the omega n frequencies have to yield me the identical result. And this property is called the intrinsic permutation symmetry. Okay. So the second order optical susceptibility has to be same if we interchange jk and omega n, omega m together. Okay. And similar symmetries are also there in higher order terms, always. Okay. 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 So this was a problem, slight problem with the thing we calculated. It is physically correct. It just, the way it is written, it doesn't have this permutation symmetry. Okay. And how do you see that? So you see that if you try to interchange these two frequencies and you try to interchange the j and k notation. So you will see that, if I change j and k here, then it will not reduce to the same quantity, basically. Okay. Okay. And that we can rectify easily. To restore the symmetry, we can define, so we can just rewrite equation 7 by forcing this symmetry. So we already defined this chi2 prime. So I will define the effective symmetrized second order susceptibility as half of whatever we defined in equation 7 plus its brother with just changed indices, let's say. Okay, so I manually changed kj and I manually changed omega p and omega q, because individually in each term I did not have this symmetry. But if I define it like this, now of course if I interchange j and k, this term just goes to this term, and the interchange of jk, this term just goes to this term, etc. So of course chi ijk is has this permutation symmetry. Okay, so this is a mathematical jugglery I did. Physically, it has exactly same info at chi2 prime. So I plot all my results using chi2 prime. I'll get identical results. Nothing will change. It's just that I did all of this to make it mathematically more symmetric, and it makes calculations. And in some cases, some interpretations, particularly for higher order susceptibilities and even for second order susceptibilities, it just makes it slightly easier, basically. Okay. So that's another important point regarding this second order susceptibility, that I derived something and then I used all my tricks to symmetrize it, basically. So if I symmetrize it, then I can explicitly write. So earlier I had two terms which are products of this row population difference. Okay. Now when I symmetrize this, I'll have, with this population, I'll have two more terms. So one here and one here. So I have this combination of 4 terms. So it's a large expression actually. And we get similar terms for different combinations of omega p and omega q, meaning I'll have one term for omega p. So assuming if omega p and omega q are greater than 0, then I'll have one term for omega p plus omega q. I'll have one term for omega p minus omega q. I'll have term for omega p plus omega p. I'll have term for omega q plus omega q. I'll have term for 0 rectification also, etc. So all of these are different coefficients, etc. And yeah, so that will involve. So this is the symmetrized susceptibility. Okay. Okay. So I can stop here, but you can have more fun in terms of physically what kind of processes are there. Then there are ways of doing this in what is called a diagrammatic perturbation theory. So there's a systematic way of writing down different kind of diagrams that can arise. So basically the ordering of these terms, etc. How does this arise? So you can write explicitly, etc. There's a very systematic way of doing diagrammatic perturbation theory, second order, third order, fourth order, and so on. In fact, currently I am also working on a diagrammatic perturbation theory, which you will read about in, let's say, Bloyd's book, in the context of condensed matter systems, basically. Okay, so if you have some you have slightly more complicated version of this kind of processes, this kind of physics. And for those, is it possible to develop a systematic perturbation theory? Okay. Systematic perturbation theory, we already know it is there, developed, etc. but is it possible to do a diagrammatic perturbation theory in the way I want it? So there are some forms of diagrammatic perturbation theory available which are done in some recent papers, but we are working on a different version of it, let's say, which may or may not turn out to be better, which may not even work as far as I know. But yeah, we are working on something related to this. Okay, so these are very state of the art topics, and a lot of work is still going on. So optics, of course, a lot of experiments, verifications, etc. But almost all of these phenomena I'm talking about in, let's say, cloud of atoms or molecules. This you can translate the similar physics to condensed matter systems in metals, insulators, and things like that. And that is actually my research area, and I'm actually working on a lot of those things. Okay. Okay. So now we have this. Then another thing I wanted to highlight was so this green bracket comes with this product of rho mn minus rho kk actually. No? Then, for example, if rho kk is equal to rho nm, so the population is equal between two pairs of levels, let's say. Then, of course, A and B will vanish. If rho kk is rho mm, okay, first term, and if rho kk is rho nn, then the last two terms vanish. Okay, so the population being equal in the two levels is a killer. So I need either excitation one side, no, either come hai, idhar se udhar jana hai, or vice versa. Idhar zyada hai, idhar kam hai, idhar se idhar ana hai. Okay. So I need either of these imbalances to have this actually. Okay, and these imbalances are the way to design which term will dominate and which term will dominate less, and accordingly I'll get either some frequency generation or difference frequency generation, and so on and so forth. Okay. Okay, so that's all I had to talk about second harmonic generation. Okay, one final except for one final point, let's say. Okay, so the way it is written now, you will always see this kind of terms, omega nm minus omega p minus omega q. So this looks like that, I climb omega p frequency, I climb omega q frequencies, and this should match with the omega nm energy level difference to make it a resonant processes, meaning chi will be a large for that kind of a process. So it almost looks like the way it is written, it highlights the, at least look in a look sense, it highlights the some frequency generation, or it highlights the two frequency generation. Okay, so you can do some mathematical jugglery, because I have a lot of these indices which are summed over, which are dummy indices, etc. So I can do some minor mathematical jugglery, nothing fancy, just simple tricks. So instead of k index, I can change the index. Then mu mn and mu nm are related. Then omega nm is just minus of omega mn. So using just this kind of facts, I can do some tricks. And in fact, instead of two population difference, I can just write it in terms of one population difference also. Okay. So as I said, so the indices mn and k, so the orbital indices are summed over, and thus they are dummy indices. Using this and some other facts such as omega lm is equal to omega ml and so on. Equation 8, which is this symmetrized susceptibility, I can rewrite, okay, in terms of just one difference of energy levels, basically. Okay, so this is also a very nice way of writing it, and this conveys slightly different information. But if you plot, etc., I mean, all the information is just identical. So I have this 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, and here you will see that I have this some frequency generation kind of term, but I also have this like difference frequency generation kind of terms, or the negative frequency generation kind of terms also involved here. Okay, and Bloyd has a nice discussion. So I can now start making these, interpreting these in terms of energy level diagrams. So I started with level n, and there's a level m in between, and level n at top. So I go from n to m with the omega p or omega q. So that will be, this process will become resonant omega ml minus omega p. So I jump from L to m with the omega p, and then I jump from so I jump from L to M, then I jump from M to N with the omega Q. That will make this term resonant. right? So this term will dominate. So those kind of phenomena will dominate here, and these will be dominated by different. So these two will be dominated by similar kind of phenomena. These two will be dominated by similar kind of phenomena, and that will give you some handle on how to design this energy level systems, so that I will have this term dominating, that term dominating, etc. So that will give you some feeling about how you can design some frequency generators or difference frequency generators or very good rectifiers and things like that. Okay, so that I'm not discussing explicitly here, but you can have a look in Bloyd, etc. And Bloyd also has a discussion, extra discussion, in addition to what we did about the diagrammatic writing of these terms actually. Yeah. So how do I write this in context of diagram? So there's a double, what is called double Feynman diagrams, etc. And you can have a look basically. But yeah, so we'll not explicitly do that here. So with that, I'll stop here. And if there are any questions, you can ask me. Okay. So I thought there should be a lot of questions on this solar cells and rectification at least. None of you are excited about the prospect of being billionaires?
Sir, we have to read more about that before asking questions, I guess.
Yeah. So technical questions, of course, you have to read more, but yeah, general questions you can always write, ask. See the, okay. So the first rule of, super learning, or, being able to learn very nicely is to be super excited about the subject. Okay. If you are excited about something, then, it is not work. It will just happen. I mean, you will not even realize that it will be fun and you will still learn. Okay. Technical details, you cannot, a lecture, I can just, if you have some questions, I can guide you. But the major part of learning should be focused on excitement. So the primary role of a teacher should be to get you excited about